last Sunday, I referred to a recent CHC blog where Bill Wilson, our director, reminds us of conversations that are being held among church leadership across the country during this pandemic. They have targeted at least 3 groups of church members during a COVID crisis, perhaps even 4. As I summarize them, I want you to think with me this morning or today of your next pastor entering this mix of expectations and perspectives. Think about the weight of responsibility when it comes to leading a diverse, big tent congregation such as ours. One group of us within the church may be wishing to restart our congregational life just as quickly as possible. Some may be thinking that we should already be back. All of us want to resume life as we knew it and to do so as quickly as possible. And the underlying assumption among this group may be that when we restart what we were doing back in March, people will return and resume the same ministry model that was in place prior to the pandemic. And that's understandable. But all of us at some level long for this security of familiar patterns that have guided our lives in the church for decades. Doing church helps make our lives make sense. So the sooner the better, the sooner the better we get back to normal. Unfortunately, it's dawning on us that to just restart may not be so simple. In limited, safe formats, people are not flocking back to worship together among those churches that have chosen to do so. Most churches experiencing now, those who've returned, only a quarter to maybe a third of the previous attendance when they come back to worship. And a majority are staying away. A second group that is emerging or expressing is that they're expressing that we need to seize this as an opportunity to refresh. And I get that too. We at First Baptist have used this as an opportunity to clean up, to do some things around the building, structures, programming. We've washed walls, windows, pressure washed concrete, a new parking lot, all of that. This pandemic has given us time to experiment even as a staff and to try things, to experiment. That's been good. But even here, though, the underlying message seems to be that while we will most certainly continue to offer virtual options in the future because we're kind of catching on to that, our primary way of doing things will, of course, revert back to pre-pandemic patterns. In the article, Wilson asks us to picture a home renovation project, where we just kind of paint over old wallpaper and replace a few fixtures. And many of us expect this, to be that kind of renovation work, where we'll come out looking better, but we'll still be very similar to what we were pre-virus. Then there's a third group among us, maybe fewer, but perhaps wiser, who are saying that, what we really need to do is relaunch congregational life for the 2020 decade. They raise the question, could it be that this is what Isaiah was pointing to when he spoke of something springing up among us, that this new thing could really emerge here in the 21st century church? Perhaps the biblical inspiration would be the pruning narratives of Jesus that promise more fruit on the other side of the pain of cutting away what does not produce fruit. Or maybe it's deeper soil where, the gospel could really take root and have new growth. The fact is, there is in our church a mix, I'm sure like all churches, of all 3 possible futures. And here we are finding ourselves trying to call the next pastor right in the middle of all of this diversity. Oh yeah, there's probably a 4th group too. There's some who will just choose to retire completely, who will choose this as the time to walk away from church. They've been on the periphery of the church's life for some time, not connected relationally, and no doubt some people just won't return. So I ask you to think about this today as a church family. We are calling a pastor to lead us now in this time when we must manage these conversations, these expectations effectively. It's holy work. to pastor a church. It's slow, deliberate, and at times uncomfortable work to do so. Churches of history must continually break up the hard ground on which we've built our church, cultivating it in the hopes that it will become the rich soil from which will spring a more relevant, thriving community of faith. So I say this today to call you to prayer. Pray for the pastor who will come, for gifts of leadership and character needed, and your expectations as you walk alongside the next pastor. Pray today for the search committee, for the process, as they discern God's will for this time. Of all the different qualities of Christian character that will be required in the next pastor, and certainly for us as a congregation, perhaps the most needed one is this fruit of the Spirit called gentleness. Stay safe, stay well, stay connected to God and to one another as you are able. Blessings.